Welcome to the August 10th Public Design Commission meeting. If you're watching via YouTube, you can find the links to the agenda, the public hearing, presentations, and instructions for giving public testimony in the, so again, if you're watching via YouTube, you can find in the links to the agenda the public hearing, presentations, and instructions for giving public testimony in the video description below the video. And if you've signed up to testify, please watch via YouTube and wait until the project you want to testify upon has been announced. At that point, please join Zoom and then turn off your video, your YouTube video, to eliminate any feedback. If you would like to give testimony today and have not signed in yet, please do sign in the Google form so that we know to call your name. And that is open, and you can find a link to that in the video description below the video. Thank you. Okay, Sydney, we can begin. One moment, sorry.
Okay. Good morning. My name is Signe Nielsen, President of the Public Design Commission. The public meeting is now commencing. I'll begin with a roll call to confirm commissioner attendance. When I call your name, just please say here. Phil Ahrens.
Here.
Lori Hawkinson.
Here.
Manuel Miranda.
Here.
Richard Moore.
Here.
Ethel Sheffer.
Here.
Meryl Tisch.
Here.
Mary Valverde.
Here.
Thank you. So we're now going to vote on the consent agenda. We have items 27550 to 27568. The staff has noted my recusal from item 27554 and Phil's recusal from item 27564. Are there any other recusals that are not noted? No. For the record, there are no further recusals. I'll now call for a vote. Commissioners, when I call your name, please state your vote for the consent agenda. You may approve or reject all. You may also reject or abstain from an individual project. Phil?
Yes.
Lori?
Yes.
Manuel?
Approval.
Richard?
Approval.
Ethel?
Approval.
Meryl?
Yes. Approval.
Mary?
Approve.
And myself approve. So the consent agenda is unanimously approved. We are now moving to the public hearing, the items of which are presently shown on the screen. The first item on the agenda is 27569, installation of a barge, gangway, storage shed, and adjacent site work to accommodate citywide ferry service in Ferry Point Park, the Bronx.
I just want to make another announcement. If you are watching the live stream now on YouTube and you would like to give public testimony on this project, please join the meeting now and turn your YouTube video off. Again, if anyone wants to give public testimony today on this project or the next project, please sign in via the Google form, and the link to that is in the YouTube video. It's also in our agenda. Okay, you can begin then.
I'm muted. I'm sorry.
Rebecca, can you unmute the group?
We can hear you. You're not
You
muted.
can hear me? Okay, thank you. Sorry. Awesome. Okay. So I'm going to present about Ferry Point Park, the new ferry landing and upland improvements. This location is in the Bronx. It is inside of Ferry Point Park, over near the Whitestone Bridge. We will be installing a new ferry landing. These are some general site photos of the area showing the existing parking lot, the existing park itself. You can see the bridge off in the distance. It has lots of large old trees, lots of open ground. This is walking into the park, slowly heading towards where the ferry will be. Passengers and park users would walk along this path. You can see there's soccer fields and baseball field here. Continue to walk along that path. There's more. I'm going too fast here. Okay, sorry. More big open trees, large fields are used for soccer. As we continue to walk down the path, we're walking towards the water. You can see it now. There's places where the path is 10 feet wide. Some places we're gonna widen it to 12 a little bit and try to not harm these gorgeous trees here. When you get to the waterfront, the path itself goes north, and we are going to follow the old path that used to be there until about the 90s that heads south and east towards the bridge. So there once was a path there, but it's been abandoned for a while. This is the flood map showing, yes, we're along the waterfront, and yes, in a big flood, it would get flooded. This is the sewer map showing that there's no outfalls directly in this area. This is the zoning map showing that we are within a park. This slide's out of place. I will come back to it in a second. Not sure what happened. This is the radius area showing that there's a lot of parkland here, and it's a little bit isolated because it's on a peninsula. So this is an overall site map showing that the Hutchinson River Parkway is going through here to go to the bridge. The parking lot area itself is here in the middle with all these soccer fields along here. Passengers will walk along this pathway to get to the waterfront, and over here is where the new ferry landing will go. So this is just an overall site map, and then we will zoom in on the existing condition. This is slide 13. I'm going to jump back to 14, which I'm sorry, I'm not sure how it got out of order. Here, so this is slide 14. This is the existing parking lot area that we are going to repave and stripe. The blue X's are showing trees that are going to be removed. They're all being removed due to poor condition, not to get out of our way. They're just in poor shape already. We had an arborist go out and review. In some places, the path is already 12 feet wide. In some places, a little bit narrower, and we will be widening it. Okay, I'm gonna jump back to where that slide should have been, sorry. Okay. This is continuing walking down the pathway to get to the waterfront, again, showing a few of the trees that are in poor condition. And then we will continue walking down this path, down this existing hill, and then along the waterfront. This is the new path that was there many years ago and that we're going to reinstall so we can get over to this black line, which is where the ferry landing will be. That'll be the access to the waterfront there. So now I'm going to show you the new amenities that we plan to install. So this is the new parking lot. We plan to repave it and grade it, paint parking spaces in it to make it a little more organized, install lighting so that there's currently, I should have pointed that out while we walk through the park, there's no lights in this park at all, so it gets dark. So there'll be lighting installed in the parking lot, and we'll have a storage shed for we're going to have a transit buddy, a little trolley that will help get passengers who might not be up for the 15-minute walk to the waterfront to help them ride in the little trolley. It's kind of like a zoo trolley. And overnight, it'll be parked in this shed, and this is where it will recharge. And then it will go into the park. It will not be crossing back and forth across the street all day, generally just at the morning and the evening, maybe midday if it needs to recharge. We're still sorting that out. And then the trolley will turn around here, go down to the waterfront, turn around, come back, and go back and forth. Also in this picture, I want to show that this little area with the pink circles, the pink are meant to show you some pink flowering trees. There's 2 bioretention zones right here and right here, so that the water from this parking lot can flow into the bioretention areas and seep back into the groundwater there. There will be a pull-off area here for the vehicle for when people are loading. This is like the bus stop, the waiting area for passengers. But you don't have to take the vehicle, the trolley. You can certainly walk to the waterfront, that's or bicycle. We're going to install a few benches and trees along the way. Continuing walking towards the waterfront, we plan to install benches throughout and lights throughout. Ferries typically run from like 6 a.m. to 10 p.m.-ish, so it gets a little bit dark in the evening. So it's good to have some lighting to help people get to the waterfront. This area here with these little pink circles are again to show some more flowering trees that we plan to install. There's a little brown rectangle there. There will be a transformer there. We need electricity for the barge on the water to raise and lower the gangways. And so to bring the electricity that far, we need to have a transformer to step up the power, I believe. We need one. And we plan to have some plantings to shield the transformer from sight a little bit. The trolley will turn around here and stop on this side so that people can load and unload and then walk on a little mini pier here on a gangway to the barge. This is just showing a turning radius study that we did, driving the vehicle through the pathways, trying to make sure we didn't need to widen anywhere, or if we did, just making sure that we had space for the vehicle to drive. So we checked our turning radiuses throughout. This is showing along the edge of the road. We plan to put a gate so that the trolley vehicle can cross the road, but that we don't have other strange cars driving into the park. There'll be a pedestrian space for people to walk in and out, and this will just be open morning and evening to get the trolley in and out. This is showing the standard pathway. There's only one trolley vehicle, so we're not going to have tons of traffic here, and it's either coming or it's going. You'll never have 2 crossing each other. There's space for pedestrians and bicycles to use this path. Also, we plan to install some benches to the edge along the way. This is showing the transformer down at the waterfront. It has some electrical panels. There'll be some plantings around it to try to shield it a little bit from the parkland. This is a picture of the shed we plan to install in the parking lot. This is where the vehicle will have a sleep overnight and be protected. It's a metal roof with just steel columns. We're trying to have it sort of mimic the comfort station, the existing comfort station in the park, just very clean lines, simple materials. We plan to have it shielded in the front from the set line of view with some bushes. We're not quite sure what the sides will be. There had been talk of chain link fence or maybe a different type of material that's still in development. And I just want to say everything. The vehicle can drive in one side and out the other side. There's gates at both ends, so it doesn't have to turn around. This is just showing, the gate at the waterfront. This is the standard gate that we use at all ferry landings. It's kind of a branding thing, so they're visually all the same. We will have the standard signage that we have at ferry landings. It's again just the standard gate that can be closed overnight when the ferries are not running. This is again showing some more of the signage that will be installed. We're not exactly sure what's going to be installed at this site yet. We're still working on that. But this is Astoria, some of the type of signage we've used at our sites. So there is this one existing light pole in the park, or I think there might be two of these. This is in the background, you can see the bridge. It's non-functioning, and we don't plan to reuse this light pole. We plan to use more modern light poles to go with the more modern like seating and comfort stations. So we're planning to use the Flushing Meadow lights along the pathway in the park and the Cobra heads in the parking lot. We plan to use the World's Fair benches, which are used elsewhere in the park along the pathway with lighting typically beside it and space for companion seating beside it. These are some of the standard ferry details that are used at all the ferry landings. There's a canopy, that's a nice white color. The steel is all exposed and nice and shiny steel, and there's an aluminum gangway, and the deck has a nice gray color to it. The benches that will be on the barge, we've updated to these Magdalen benches that are a little more curvy. There's windscreens on the barges to help keep it a little bit warmer, and keeping it a little bit warmer, there's also heaters, lighting for the evenings, and ticket machines, and a screen to tell you when the next when the next ferry is coming. This is the handrail that will be installed along the little pier at the waterfront. And these are our trees that we're planning to install throughout the park. These top ones are for the parking lot, the honey locust, the swamp oak, and the black gum, with the skip laurel getting installed along the front of the transit shed. In the bioretention area, we're planning to do eastern redbud and redwood dogwood. And then over by the transformer down by the waterfront, more of the redwood dogwood, bayberry, and serviceberry, just to have some additional plantings in the area. That's our overview of the site. Can I answer any questions?
I had a couple of questions, although you've answered many of them. Thank you. How big is the parking lot in terms of the number of spaces? I think you gave us numbers, but I wasn't quick enough to add them all up in my head.
Absolutely. I forget, and here it is. It's a total of 210 with
Great.
eight for ADA.
So I didn't see any indication as to how close the ferry terminal was to any transit, either bus or subway. So are you expecting pretty much everyone to drive?
To either drive or come to use the park, yes.
And is this striped lighted parking lot fenced from the larger parking lot?
So in the existing parking lot, there's a row of rocks, large boulders so you can't drive through, that make the parking lot approximately this size. And we have pushed it just a little bit farther over, but we're basically maintaining the existing parking lot size. So yes, there is going to be a timber rail fence along this edge that will delineate the edge of the parking lot.
And is this a single ferry going from Ferry Point Park to wherever it goes, or is it an added stop on another route?
It's an added stop on the route that it currently ends at Soundview. So then it'll go from Soundview up here to Ferry Point Park and then continue, then turn around. This will be the end stop, and then go back to Soundview and then head back towards Manhattan.
I guess the only issue that, I mean, it's a lot of change to an existing park for an additional, what, 200 passengers on the best day?
Yes. Yes. We are hoping to add capacity to this park or to the ferry system. And Simon, do you want to chime in? Could we unmute Simon?
Hi, I'm Simon Betzlow with the EDC. It definitely has changed to the park, but in many ways it's improving the existing features of the park. The parking lot is already there, as is the path. It's just formalizing them as well as bringing some improvements like lighting and seating.
I have a question. Do you anticipate this ferry schedule to have additional times? Or what? I'm just really confused about the necessity to have this specific location. And if you had, I'm just wondering if you had studied the location or surrounding areas so that this ferry spot would actually support the public's commuter experience, because it just seems like you're creating this landing for this specific corner or space, but it's not really supporting this idea of making a connection to the public and actually functioning to help shorten commuters in general. It seems pretty arbitrary to me in terms of the placement, and I don't know how any of the other commissioners feel, but it just, to me, it feels like if there is a very limited idea of how this ferry landing will support the borough of the Bronx or that neighborhood, what is the benefit of just making a landing for this specific space? Can you clarify this?
Sure. In 2018, the ferry system was undergoing its initial study for expansion. The Bronx and all the other boroughs were polled, and Ferry Point actually repeatedly and was the most requested place in the Bronx for a new ferry station landing. We've spoken to the community board. The community is excited for the additional transit access. It seems a little arbitrary, the location. Not so much Ferry Point Park itself, but kind of how we're going to the southern portion of the park. That was due to after the selection of the site based on the community opinion and survey. The southern location for the ferry landing itself was the only place on the park that operated correctly with the currents and other sort of
Water depth
navigation issues.
Water depth.
But it did seem that, especially when we spoke to the community board last month, that there was some excitement and some support around addressing the request.
Other commissioners? Questions, comments?
Yeah, I guess to me, it just doesn't answer the question about ridership. Who are we helping? Like, if you really want to help the community access possibly the Target or other public transportation connections, wouldn't you want to access or have a landing that's closer to that position or that spot in the map? It's not really answering my questions.
Sure, sorry. We've discussed trying to include provisions for public transit to reach this park. Unfortunately, that's a little out of our scope or our ability with this improvement. Bringing the ferry station to the Bronx, there's currently, it's underserved by the ferry system. So looking for an additional station is improving transit for the borough. In terms of ridership for the ferry system in general has exceeded expectations. So, we can't necessarily project how it will be accepted or adopted by the community, but initial survey results and also our initial studies show that it will be used. And that the provision of 210 parking spots will be adequate for the ferry users as well as the park users. I hear your concern though that, who is this serving? And it's not standard for, for a ferry station to have an accompanying parking lot. So there are some constraints. But this was deemed
That, I would say if you are anticipating, ridership to go up, then why make it where there could only be 200 parking spots? And so far, that doesn't, do you understand what I'm asking you? It's like, it doesn't make any sense. If you're saying a lot of people are going to use this, it's going to be used productively, then it shouldn't, then why are you limiting access to only 200 people?
Sure.
You know what I mean?
The parking lot currently, the current parking lot is sized based on that existing informal parking lot. The remainder of that area adjacent to the park is slated for potential improvement by the Parks Department. And they have potential plans to expand a parking lot as well as offer amenities in that area. So our initial parking lot is based on the current usage and then formalizing it to allow organization. But the remainder of that lot has the potential for an expansion of that lot, depending on the park's usage.
Can I ask a question and follow up on Commissioner Valverde?
Certainly, Ethel.
Thank you. I understand what you were saying, but a follow-up, since you're setting something up with the 200 cars, and that the way to get to the ferry is the auto. I'm not advocating this, but are there ways for others to come by public transportation? In this case, let's say in a bus system, buses that may be serving other communities and could bring people who do not arrive by car, but could get to use the ferry. And that's one of the ways that the ridership, in fact, would go up. I mean, now we don't know how, you're kind of constraining the access to the ferry is via auto, and you've got the 200 cars, and that might get multiplied in the course of the day. But it appears that the way you're gaining access to the ferry is limited by the access to the ferry. Like it is who can drive and not others.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a valid point. The closest existing bus station is about a mile north at the shopping center that's north of this site. So public transportation access to this park is an issue regardless, I think, of the ferry system improvement or not. But unfortunately, the modification of that bus route is kind of outside of our ability as part of this project. Since it is an additional mile, it adds travel time to the bus. I mean, hopefully the ridership and the park users and the community can advocate for the bus system to transition. I will say we are including bicycle parking in this station, so accessing the station by bicycle is an option.
Do you have can you pull out and show us where that access to the bus is that's a mile away? Do you have a more urban map there, I'm
trying to see if,
like where would that be? I mean, normally one shows how you get to places in projects like this, like walking distances or transportation distances. So, I mean, I think it's a very key point when we're spending $28 million.
Simon, I think it's about up here because this is the edge of the parking.
Yeah, exactly. The shopping center is up there.
And it's a little bit up this way.
Maybe the zoning map shows.
Sure. I think those are all a little too zoomed in.
The zoning map is pretty good.
Okay, thank you. Here.
Yeah, so the commercial area to the north has the closest existing bus stop.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, this isn't really in the purview of the designers or but it's just a question as to how I guess the decisions get made to place a ferry terminal in a location like this without the passenger support.
Good morning, commissioners. Hi, it's Gail. I just like to say I totally understand your question. Unfortunately, the EDC representatives who are at this meeting now are responsible for the design and construction and not necessarily the planning. We have a whole ferry team that has implemented this new service for the last couple of years. And I am happy to reach out to them and get back to you with more details about how exactly this was chosen, what were the studies, more specifics on and I think that will better help to answer your questions.
That's certainly a good idea.
Okay, I can take care of that.
That'd be great, Gail. Thank
Sure.
you.
Yeah.
Of course.
I can just say from a marine perspective, it's too shallow to come up this way, and it's too shallow over here. So water depth is a challenge in this area.
Right. Yeah, I think there's understanding the water depth issue. It's the connectivity. If this is public infrastructure taking up public park and public space, we need to know that the connectivity is there for this infrastructure to work.
Right.
Yes, because if it's not, then it's basically putting a lot of money on a very specific project to only support a very limited population, which is not what we're about. So you should really consider that.
So then I'd like to maybe take an informal poll as to whether people would prefer to defer a vote until we have more clarity with regard to what Gail has offered to research, or whether we would like to vote with conditions. Just an informal poll before we make anything final.
I mean, I think it's hard to impose conditions without the information. Mary's done a terrific job in articulating the issue. And while I understand it's not EDC's prerogative, it's our prerogative to evaluate the impact that this will have on the park. And it just, without some understanding of how people are really going to get here, I don't think it's easy to do. And it's not that difficult to engage in a conversation as to whether the bus route can be extended the 1 mile from the shopping center to this parking lot. And I think that answer would allay a lot of the concern that I've heard and that I share about whether or not this makes any sense in terms of the hardscape imposition on a public park.
I agree.
I agree.
Yeah, I would agree. I agree with that.
Okay, based on that.
And Signe, I also want to just mention that we have no one has signed up to testify on this project.
Okay.
And anyone else wants to say anything, you can raise your hand.
So I would suggest then that if, with your concurrence submitters in EDC, that we not take a vote and that we wait to receive the information that you've offered to provide regarding access. And then we can, if that's satisfactory, it would just go on next month's consent agenda without the need for a formal presentation, depending on what the response is.
Understood.
Okay, so then it would be tabled.
Yes.
Great.
Did someone just want to say something there? Okay.
I think we're ready to move on to the next project. Signe, I think we need to formalize the tabling if you want to just go through.
Okay, now you should be unmuted, Signe.
Yes. All right.
Sorry, Signe.
No problem. So we need to take a formal vote on tabling the Ferry Point Park project. So your vote to approve is your vote to table. Not to confuse. You can approve, reject, table, or abstain. Phil.
Table.
Lori.
Table.
Manuel.
Table.
Richard.
Table.
Ethel.
Table.
Merrill.
We may have lost Meryl from the
Okay.
call.
Mary.
Table.
All right, and with myself, that is unanimous to table this project. So now we can move on to item 27570, design of prototypical shrouds for 4G and 5G telecommunication equipment for installation on light poles citywide.
Now, if you're in the meeting now and you'd like to testify on this project, please sign in at the at the sign-in form. You can find that sign-in form on our website. It's on the meeting agenda. It's also in the YouTube video below in the description. The address is tinyurl.com/PDC meeting form. Again, if you would like to give public testimony on the next project, which is the 5G shrouds installations, please do sign in on the form. We will be calling the names in the order in which they appear on the form. Again, we'll need to see that your names are correct, so you can rename yourself to match your name from the sign-in form. Otherwise, we have some people with phone numbers, so we'll see those numbers. And if you're watching via YouTube and you want to give testimony, go ahead and join the meeting now and turn off your YouTube video, or just close YouTube altogether, and that will eliminate the feedback issue. For standard procedure, public testimony will be limited to 3 minutes, and we ask that people focus on the Public Design Commission's purview of design. Okay, so we can start the presentation now.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Brett Sykoff, Director of Mobile Telecommunications Franchises with the Department of Information Technology and Telecommunications. I am extremely thrilled to be here today to present a new design for pole top equipment that advances the city's goal of expanding mobile telecommunications services throughout the city, including and notably 5G service. DoIT has collaborated with a consortium of industry stakeholders in a truly unprecedented fashion to arrive at a single, uniform design that both accommodates and conceals each carrier's unique equipment needs. The transition of 5G is in full swing. Over the coming months and years, additional 5G-capable handsets will hit the market. There are many applications that could benefit New Yorkers that can only be realized with robust 5G networks. What is 5G? While 4G remains the dominant wireless technology now, 5G promises to deliver extremely fast speeds with very low latency or responsiveness. High-band 5G, however, requires a dense distribution of wireless transmitters, as it is susceptible to physical interference and generally requires unobstructed line of sight from the antenna to the user device. Small wireless facilities, like small cells, in contrast to macro towers commonly found on building rooftops, are small, low-powered antennas that provide needed coverage or additional capacity. "5G will become the new standard for mobile telecommunications in the city, and indeed the world. Installation of 5G equipment in cities across the country has largely been unregulated. In a moment, I'll show you some examples from elsewhere around the country that resulted from a lack of coordination on design. To avoid a similar outcome, DoIT directed the wireless industry to collaborate to design the smallest possible uniform pole attachment capable of accommodating every carrier's 4G and 5G needs, both now and into the future. As you can see in this map, the majority of 4G pole installations today have been in the core of Manhattan. We will reverse that trend to ensure that 5G is equitably deployed in the city so that all New Yorkers have access to reliable and affordable wireless service. This is particularly essential for those who rely on their mobile phones, as you can see in these areas in Zone C here, who rely on mobile phones as their primary, or in some cases, their only means of connecting to the internet while at home. In this slide, we demonstrate the potential distribution of pole installations serving the 3 wireless carriers in a low-density Zone C neighborhood. And here is an example of a high-density Zone A neighborhood. As you can see, a number of poles will be needed throughout each neighborhood. As I mentioned, industry collaboration on design was essential. Furthermore, our goal is to oversee the replacement of all existing 4G only installations with new 4G and 5G equipment and facilitate thousands of additional 5G installations throughout the city over the next few years with a strong focus on equity. We will continue to work with our agency partners to implement review process efficiencies to expedite approvals. As I touched on earlier, the wireless industry has largely gone unregulated with regard to new pole installations. There are some examples in other US cities. As you can see, a lot of this equipment is unshrouded and is just kind of haphazardly deployed on poles. Some more examples. As far as the city's oversight, DoIT's pole reservation system assigns a set number of poles and an area of focus from which franchisees select, and is designed to incentivize the wireless industry to provide the best service in every neighborhood, not just the core of Manhattan. DoIT and DOT, and where applicable, landmarks and parks, review each pole reservation on a case-by-case basis. It is anticipated that every new 5G pole installation will require an upgraded foundation to fortify the pole, cost of which is borne on the franchisee. The federal government has developed rules and statutes governing radio frequency emissions, and each franchisee is contractually obligated to comply with all FCC guidelines related to RF emissions, and DoIT is committed to holding each franchisee to this standard. Each 4G and 5G pole installation consists of 2 visible elements on the pole: the antenna shroud at the top of the pole and the equipment housing about halfway up on the pole. I will now turn it over to Rob Manzo of AT&T to walk you through the proposed design. Rob?
Yes, can you hear me?
We can.
All right, thank you. My name is Robert Manzo. I'm with AT&T, and I'm representing the wireless consortium on this design. And I wanted to take you through some exhibits, some photo sims, and some renderings here. So the existing design has served us well over the years. However, the industry has maximized its usefulness at this point, and we needed another form factor to accommodate the growth that Brett indicated. The consortium had 4 objectives. We wanted a clean, simple design. We wanted to avoid additional sidewall clutter. We wanted to come up with a design that would minimize the number of poles that were required. And we wanted a design that accommodated the wireless carriers' technology roadmap into the future. So as we looked at examples across the world, rather than proposing a revolutionary new concept, we just evolved the original and expanded upon the equipment shroud and the antenna at the top of the pole. So this exhibit shows a current FS pole, typical pole. This makes up about 70–80% of the poles in the city that have been historically attached to. The new concept is on the right, a 5'3" tall antenna shroud at the top, roughly or 21 inches in diameter, an equipment shroud about roughly 17 feet, slightly larger than the current equipment shroud, and a foundation that's the same width and depth and about a foot taller. So it will minimize the impact on the sidewalk as well by going a little deeper and reinforcing that foundation to accommodate the additional weight. Next page. Okay, so this is another exhibit showing a little bit more detail on the antenna shroud. The reason for the diameter of the antenna shroud was to accommodate the current and future needs of the carriers. With the 5G technology, the antennas will need to be at the top, and the radios and antennas are one, and will need to be at the top of the pole. Because of the high frequencies, they'll need to be line of sight to the users. So it's important that we had the space at the top to accommodate what we know of today and what we believe will be coming in the future. In the middle, you'll see a typical 4G antenna that'll still be there, and typical 5G micro radio in the, below. On the right, again, the 5G micro radio detail, and below that is the new equipment shroud, which is really just a larger version of what we have today. Next page. Okay, so now these are the renderings of the pole top installation. So you can see that it's dimensioned. There's slots at the top, at the bottom. That's to allow for airflow. Using the chimney effect, air will come in from the bottom, flow across the electronics in the middle, and flow out, and keeping them at operating. The slots are shown at the bottom, at the top there. This will be this shroud will be made of RF transparent material that is UV stabilized. Next slide. Again, this is a photo simulation of what would typically be found in the antenna shroud. This will vary by carrier, vary over time, but this is what would be typically installed, at least initially. So this is a rendering of the equipment box. So as you can see, very similar to the existing. It's the existing is about 2.8 cubic feet in volume. This is slightly under 5 cubic feet to accommodate the current and the expected needs of the carriers into the future. We thought this was a very elegant design. We wanted to keep it, and it was very similar to what's out there today. Next page. This is the equipment shroud mounted on a pole for either on the top left is the running the cables through the pole for an antenna at the top of the pole, and on the bottom left for mounting the antenna on the side mount option. And so where the cables will be running through a conduit. With the additional requirements of radios, antennas, ports to accommodate the speeds and the low latency that we expect, we needed additional cables, fiber cables, power cables, RF coaxial cables. So we came up with this design where if the antenna is mounted on the side, we have a conduit that conceals all the cables. As you can see on the right, upper right-hand corner, that attachment allows us to continue to ventilate the equipment shroud, but conceal all the cables so they're not seen. And that was major objective, to keep it clean and simple and to not have any unsightly cables. Next page. This is just a rendering of the cup details, exactly the same what we have today. Next page. This is a photo simulation of what you would typically find inside the equipment shroud. Again, this is will vary by carrier and will vary over time, but this is how the radios would be mounted, with the radios at the top, combiners below, fans at the bottom to allow for the air to circulate. Next page. So now I'll take you through some photo simulations of the poles, the most widely available poles that the carriers have installed their antennas on as of today. This is an FS pole. On the left is the existing, on the right is the proposed. So this FS pole makes up of roughly to 70 to 80% of all the installations that are out there today. So our focus was to, this was our starting point for our design. Again, this is another photo simulation of the FS pole. Next, this is a flat push pole. Again, on the left is the current, on the right is the proposed. As you can see, here's another view. Next page. This is the Bishop Crook. Again, on the left is the existing, the right is proposed. This would be a side mount. And the conduit there will conceal all cables going to the antenna shroud. Okay, another view. This is an ADN pole, left and right. Left is current, right is proposed. Again, the side mount concealing all cables. Next page. This is the Type M. Again, this is a left and right of current and proposed. This is a dual arm option. Next page. This is a 30-foot davit, another side mount. Again, and this is the dual arm. Next page. This is a city light, current and proposed. Another view. Next page. This is the M2, current and proposed. And TBTA, current and proposed. Next page. I'll hand it back to Brett. Thank you.
Thanks, Rob. So yeah, just to finish off, the proposed design will be used by all carriers and will immediately move the needle on 5G access in the city to help bridge the digital divide. Finally, DO-IT will continue to review alternative infrastructure solutions that will serve to supplement the proposed design. With that, I'd like to thank you all for this opportunity to present to you today and happy to answer any questions.
Hi, so we will now go to our public testimony, and just want to let everyone know, if you're listening, we do need you to sign in the sign-in form so that we know who wants to speak, and we can call you. We'll call people in the order in which they've signed in. That form, you can find it on our website. It's also on the agenda and in the YouTube video description. So the URL is, if you want to just link to it, is tinyurl.com/EDC meeting. And so also, if you're listening or you're watching on YouTube right now and you're going to give public testimony, please close your YouTube. Otherwise, we may get some feedback, which can be very confusing. And again, everyone, we're limiting testimony to 3 minutes per standard procedure, and please focus on the PDC's jurisdiction of design. Thank you. Okay. So the first person on our list is Odette Wilkins. So I'm going to unmute you. Okay, Odette, I have sent an unmute request.
Yes, thank you very much.
Okay.
Shall I start?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Good morning. My name is Odette Wilkins. I am speaking for New Yorkers for Wired Tech. We want New York City to be the best in broadband, but there is nothing aesthetic about wireless 4G or 5G or their shrouds, an inferior product that is a public health hazard and a privacy risk. Aesthetics means what is the safest, fastest, and most cyber secure. Wired fiber optics through the premises, 20 times faster than 5G at 200 gigabits per second. Chattanooga, Tennessee already offers up to 10 gigabits per second. It's the quote, best internet in the US, period, according to tech.co article of 8/21/18. Chattanooga choo-choo? As we say in New York, you've got to be kidding me. Their success wired fiber optics to the premises. It covers 600 square miles, twice the area of New York City. The answer for New York City, wired fiber optics to the premises. Didn't Verizon promise us that? Haven't we already paid for it? Didn't Verizon already install it? They did in my building. Wireless is not entirely wireless, but requires fiber optics. With fiber optic signals already running up to city poles, why not go directly to the premises, just a few hundred feet away? Let's call 4G and 5G what they really are. Pulsed modulated microwave radiation, pulsing out at high power levels. They will expose New York City residents to extreme antenna proximity to this radiation in our homes, medical facilities, schools, and public areas. Fiber optics is a straight line to your device, but wireless creates radiation pollution. It sprays radiation into the air continuously, not just to your device, but to the whole community, 24/7. It's like secondhand smoke. New York City is not preempted from examining this hazard. The Telecommunications Act has left the operations of wireless facilities to local control. For example, effects on health, the environment, agriculture, aviation safety. The National Environmental Policy Act, NEPA, requires an environmental assessment. The DC Circuit Court of Appeals vacated the FCC's rule foregoing environmental review in August 2019 as arbitrary and capricious. That means that NEPA review applies to every franchise applying in New York City for wireless facilities. Microwave radiation is a possible carcinogen according to a branch of the World Health Organization. Worse than lead. Children have thinner skulls, so the radiation can penetrate more deeply into their brains. Wireless invades our privacy because data can be easily tracked and hacked. Only fiber optics can bridge the digital divide, providing equal access to all. Choose the superior aesthetic because New York City deserves the best. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. The next person on our list, oh, there's the timer. You are just in time. The next person on our list is Jeanette Hasberg, but I do not see her in the meeting. We do have a couple of phone numbers, so if you call, I'm sorry?
Hi, I'm here. My
hi,
name is
Jeanette.
Jeanette
Thank you.
Hasberg. Hi.
Go ahead.
My name is Jeanette Hasberg. I'm a certified health coach and a grandmother, and I speak for myself and grandparents against 5G, geoengineering, and fluoride. I speak from my own lived experience and personal research, the truth to the best of my knowledge, from a sense of commitment to defend my beautiful city and the health and well-being of my fellow New Yorkers. And to me, it's ironic that we're discussing shrouds. I might say these shrouds are like putting lipstick on a pig, but it's more like dressing a cadaver in a wedding dress and calling it a bride. The appearance can be beautified, but sadly, not the effect. Camouflage here reminds me of the brightly colored bomblets of cluster bombs in warfare that looked like toys and blew up when children handled them. A friend in California sent me a photograph of a cell phone tower made to look like a date palm tree, but unlike the other trees, it had hundreds of dead bees underneath that needed to be swept up daily. A PubMed study in 2019 testing volunteer adolescent boys over a 2-year period whose school was adjacent to a cell phone base station showed cognitive delays in memory, attention, and fine motor skills compared with students whose schools were further away. Just imagine the effects on less hardy individuals, like young children, seniors, and pregnant women. Other studies abound indicating the various neurological, autoimmune, metabolic, carcinogenic, and reproductive dangers of broadband. But the densified grid of thousands of additional antenna to accommodate every carrier of 4G and 5G in the next 2 to 3 years indicate to me that New York is less at risk of falling behind than it is at risk of rushing headlong over a cliff. All the wonders of personal computers we have experienced in the last 3 decades can be addressed by fulfilling the promise of the utilities to furnish high-speed internet to the premise of homes, schools, businesses, and places of worship with wired connections. Wired internet is safer from hacking, relatively harmless to health, the most equitably distributed across the digital divide, and the most secure and reliable even in a blackout, and many, many times faster than any wireless mode. The expense of such a build-out of wired tech has already been paid to the utilities themselves by their customers, but the companies unlawfully switched over to wireless for greater profit and alleged conformity to outdated FCC guidelines, which have zero guarantee of safety. So in my opinion, the ethical display for these so-called shrouds should be brightly colored at least to demarcate these antennae, or have flashing lights with functioning meters reporting on the radiation emanating from them, rather than accommodating every carrier with access to the multiplicity of locations. Okay. Well, can I just say the last sentence?
Yes, sure.
Okay. All right. It's time to rethink the deployment, not implement reviews to an efficiency to enable expedited approval. The damage from rushing ahead will be not easily undone. The hazards of 5G to humanity and nature are not indemnified by any insurance company, and the frequencies themselves are inescapable, unnatural, and unnecessary. Thank you.
Thank you. The next person on our list is Jeremy Woodruff. Jeremy, I just sent a request to unmute you.
I think I'm unmuted now.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. Good morning, commissioners. My name is Jeremy Woodruff, and I'll be giving testimony in 2 parts. First, summarizing written testimony submitted by the Victorian Society. Founded in New York City in 1966, the Victorian Society in America is dedicated to fostering the appreciation and preservation of our 19th and early 20th century heritage. The New York chapter promotes preservation of our historic districts, individual landmarks, interiors, and civic art. The chapter opposes the proposed NYC 5G solution. This proposed equipment is significantly more obtrusive and out of scale than existing equipment. We believe the installation will degrade the public visual environment. It would be especially offensive on classically designed lampposts such as the Bishop's Crook, M Post, and Triborough, as well as the modern City Light Post. To affix alien equipment of this scale to carefully and delicately designed lampposts will compromise their design integrity and adversely affect the public streetscape. We recommend that DoIT find another solution. At the very least, we urge that this equipment not be affixed to old and historic lampposts or to reproduction historic lampposts and other carefully designed posts. Despite DoIT's promise not to use old and historic posts, many of them are not individually designated landmarks, and thus we are concerned about their protection. If the installation nonetheless goes forward as proposed, then we recommend that these profit-making companies mitigate their actions and compensate the public in kind. First, by providing a fund to restore and maintain all remaining historic lampposts, and second, by providing a fund to install and maintain appropriate historic reproduction lampposts in all historic districts that currently don't have them. And now my personal testimony. I have had a fascination with public street lighting my entire life. When I worked at the Landmarks Commission, I completed a survey of historic lampposts that somehow had escaped removal, and then wrote the designation report making them landmarks. I worked with DOT as well as PDC, the Art Commission at the time, to preserve them and to bring back to the city's streetlight catalog the type M mast arm, F, and lyre posts, and to install reproductions in historic districts by both private donors and as part of city-funded projects. In researching these activities, I found a trove of material in PDC's own files. I'll try to show them to you here. exquisite original drawings and photographs of lampposts carefully designed, reviewed, and approved by people who understood classical design, proportion, detailing, and the importance of these kinds of furnishings to the image of the city. They described the objective from the earliest years of the Art Commission to give us a city that is beautiful as well as vibrant, rich in the public realm as well as the private. It would be a travesty for the Commission to approve this desecration of these carefully designed public amenities for commercial purposes. PDC must require do it to find another way. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, the next person on our list is Ellen Osuna, but I don't think she has joined. So I'm going to go to Todd Fine. I'm going to unmute you now.
Hello? Yes.
Hi.
Yes. So I'm Todd Fine. I'm the president of the Washington Street Advocacy Group, which advocates on preservation and aesthetic issues. And this presentation did not have any designer or expert in the aesthetics of lampposts, which I find quite surprising for a venture that plans to make huge changes to many or all of the lampposts in the city. And they also did not respond to the arguments made by Landmark West, the Society for the Architecture of the City, and the Victorian Society of New York. And these have been well publicized. This is a one-size-fits-all design with no variety of the design at all to accommodate different lamppost designs. And despite the criticism that they make of other cities in their pictures, I noticed that the Los Angeles and the San Francisco designs seem much more consistent with the specific designs of the lampposts that they were added to. As the point was just made, lampposts are extremely important part of the streetscape design in the city, and several dozen are even landmark, and others are designed as replicas precisely in order to enhance historic districts across the city. The detail on the poles shows the extreme historic attention to these designs, which are very carefully balanced with ornate detail. And instead, we're going to put a one-size-fits-all huge object that's made, even, as the speaker said, even larger than necessary in order to accommodate some future possibility. So even if the color is matched, which they showed in their pictures, although we don't know if in reality the color will be matched that carefully, it could be implemented quite badly, as we often see in the city, especially if there's not any specific regulation about these aesthetic issues. The design clearly conflicts with the angles of the post and the ornate features, and there was no accommodation made for any of this. There was just this expectation that the technology makes it necessary, and we don't have the funds, or we don't have any desire to do that. So I would like to see the companies, as what Mr. Woodruff made the point, is the companies that are going to benefit massively from this appropriation of the infrastructure of the city should be involved in altering the design specifically, in ensuring that there's upkeep to the lamppost. There needs to be much more detail about how this would be implemented and how it would be funded in order to deal with these aesthetic issues. The Design Commission just approved this without any thought, or just because of the financial interest. It would represent an abrogation of their role in this process. Thank you.
Okay, the next person on our list is Gusti Bogok, and I'm going to unmute you.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Gusti Bogok. I attest and affirm that the following statements are true, accurate, and within my personal knowledge. I oppose the city's plan to deploy thousands of shrouded, irradiating devices of private wireless companies on public light poles. The presence of these devices is unsightly. Wherever deployed, once operational, they would transmit pulse-modulated microwave radiation throughout our neighborhoods 24/7, 365, disrupting the quiet enjoyment of our streets. Pulse-modulated microwave radiation is a category of noise vibration that, though undetected by the conscious mind, is experienced by the brain as interruptive. Every cell in the body reacts in the moment to pulse-modulated spiking thousands of times per second. Thousands of peer-reviewed studies have shown that modulated microwave radiation causes biological harm. For example, The Bioinitiative report, updated in 2020, involving at least 29 scientists and health experts from over 10 countries, concluded adverse effects, including memory impairment, attention deficit headaches, tinnitus, dizziness, seizures, melatonin suppression, sleep disturbances, fatigue, cardiac arrhythmias, high blood pressure, birth defects, DNA breakage, cancer, and impaired immunity. We cannot have impaired immunity while trying to avert infectious diseases. There's nothing aesthetic about navigating New York City streets amid an onslaught of ubiquitous industrial equipment next to homes. To make matters worse, if the city proceeds with installing concealed, disguised, or quote-unquote beautified irradiating devices, this would be akin to a sneak attack on unsuspecting residents. What could be uglier than bodily assault? As a person who suffers from electromagnetic sensitivity, I can attest to the horrific effects of exposure. I have undergone countless sleepless nights during which my body would often shake, once to the point of convulsion. I've had recurring bouts of rapid heartbeat, splitting headaches, ringing in the ears, burning skin, nausea, and fatigue. On a practical level, last year I had to flee New York City to save my life. I lost my home in Chelsea, my neighborhood, livelihood, and ability to mingle in society. I've endured financial hardship and long separations from loved ones. I urge you to learn the truth about this radiation from those who've already been injured by it, as well as scientists and weapons experts. Abandon your plan to deploy these dangerous fixtures, if not for the sake of the people of New York, then for your own sakes. Thank you.
Okay, the next person on our list is Susan Peters. Are you there, Susan?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Susan Peters and I am retired. I worked for 37 years for corporations here in New York City in the financial district. I was a technologist. Because I worked every day 8 or more hours a day in front of a computer, I began early on in the 1980s to use a Gauss meter to test for electromagnetic fields emanating from the equipment around me. I wished to protect my health and feel safe in the environment of computers. I use today the tri-field meter model 100XE. Today, I still use the Gauss meter to register my environment in my home and outside the home. I do this since I am very aware of the environmental effects of pulse modulated microwave radiation. I have confirmed with this meter that the park I ride my bike in every day does not have elevated levels of this radiation. So I can emotionally feel secure and safe and enjoy my time in the park. However, when I leave my apartment entrance and walk 50 feet to the corner to the stores, my Gauss meter registers between 50 to 100 milligauss in the direction and vicinity of the pole that has what looks to me from these pictures a 4G to be soon 5G shroud. The biological recommended exposure is up to 3 milligauss. I'm registering 50 to 100 outside my building. This causes me great emotional upset. As the dictionary.com definition of aesthetics includes the emotions, and I quote it here, concerned with the study of the mind and the emotions in the sense of beauty. Please note, with the use of a wired broadband directly to our houses, we wouldn't need to put anything of this nature on top of our public poles. It would be ridiculous. Please, you will be protecting yourself, your children, and all the people you've taken oaths to protect. Thank you.
Thank you. So the last person on our list is Alfonso Jenkins, but I do not see anyone named Alfonso Jenkins in our meeting. Okay. Someone just signed up named Andrew Padilla. So we'll wait a minute to see if Andrew joins. Okay, again, we had an Ellen Asuno, Alfonso Jenkins, and Andrew Padilla signed up, but I do not see any of them in the meeting. So give them a few more minutes, maybe a minute.
Carrie, Andrew.
I see Andrew. Andrew, are you there? Sorry. Okay, he's unmuted now. Andrew? Andrew, are you there? Would you like to give your testimony?
Let's go.
Again, okay, Andrew, he is in the meeting and he is unmuted. Andrew Padilla, if you'd like to start your testimony, you can start. Okay, maybe that was a misunderstanding. Okay, so I think we can go ahead with the commissioner deliberation and questions.
Okay. Thank you for your presentation and for those of you who spoke up. I guess I would like to ask a question of the DoIT folks. How would you respond to those individuals who spoke about the diversity and significance of health hazards associated with this technology?
There we go. So thank you for that feedback, and we appreciate everyone's comments. I would just note I couldn't be any clearer, and the federal government's guidance on this couldn't be any clearer. The FCC, the Federal Communications Commission, has the complete authority with respect to radio frequency emissions. The city and all cities and municipalities are limited in its authority. I would note, however, that we have taken what is seemingly an unprecedented step, which is to ensure that our franchisees in their franchise agreements maintain full compliance with FCC maximum permissible levels of exposure, and even take it a step further, requiring periodic testing at cell sites. So there's no question that we are similarly concerned. We will monitor the science as necessary, but we take our full guidance from the federal government on this issue. I don't know if Rob has any additional thoughts from the industry side.
No, I agree with you. We are bound by the FCC regulations, and small cells RF exposure is significantly lower than the FCC limit. So we take that seriously. We deploy installations that meet the FCC requirements, and we do our own assessments as well.
Well, I guess the question would be, given the proposed density of these installations, is there a concern that the accumulation of frequencies is actually, I mean, I appreciate other folks who understand what's happening here. I mean, I get it intellectually, but I'm just trying to understand that, okay, one pole in this location is controlled by the FCC. But if there's another pole here and another pole here, doesn't that create a compounded situation that could exceed the FCC regulations?
Yeah, so I would note that in the FCC's guidelines on this issue on RF, they do take into consideration the aggregate of all RF in a particular area, and the FCC absolutely accounts for that in its methodology. So in every location that we've tested, that we've done an independent test of the existing installations, every location has been hundreds of times, and I emphasize hundreds of times below the maximum permissible levels of exposure. So if the FCC says this level is safe, the actual levels being emitted from the existing installations, and we anticipate this will be the same for the 5G, will be far below those levels. And yes, to answer your question, Commissioner, it does take into consideration the aggregate of all RF emitting devices in an area.
Commissioners, I just want to pause because we did have Andrew Padilla, who had signed up, seems to be ready. So I'm just going to give him another chance. Andrew, are you there?
Yeah, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
I apologize about that. My browser was not allowing me to unmute. Good morning, commissioners. I am a lifelong resident of New York City, and I am simply here today to tell the commissioners that there has been no substantive process for community engagement and review of the health and safety ramifications of this 5G rollout. Public engagement processes at all levels, as we all know, have been severely hindered by the COVID-19 pandemic. I mean, we barely got our community boards back up and running. We are still struggling to figure out what digital ULURP will look like. We are all grappling with the ways rapid digitization is impacting how families without access to internet, our elderly, our disabled, engage with the business of government. This pandemic should not be an excuse for avoiding basic democratic processes. I'll repeat that because there was a souped up car passing by. The pandemic should not be an excuse for avoiding basic democratic processes in changes that will so profoundly impact our city. And thank you for bearing with me with the mic problems.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Manuel, did you have something you wanted to say?
Yeah, I had two questions. One is about technology, and one is about the design itself of the shroud. The first question, if you could just give a short explanation, for a layperson, the difference between, say, 5G and wireless technology, or 5G and Wi-Fi technology. Are they the same thing, or are they different? Second question, or second comment, actually, on the design of the shroud. I wonder if it's possible to study marking it with some kind of symbol that indicates what it is, either if that's text or if that's a symbol. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Okay, so I'm sorry, just repeat the question again. The 5G, the difference between the 5G and the 4G technologies?
No, just the difference between 5G wireless technology and say like Wi-Fi. Is there a difference, or are those one and the same thing?
Wi-Fi is a mostly unlicensed, works on unlicensed spectrum, so the footprint would be much smaller. These are licensed. We utilize licensed spectrum, so more robust technology with carry high grade components to withstand the conditions of climate, environmental conditions, and they operate at a slightly higher power. So you would be, and also we don't, we're licensed, we operate on a licensed frequency, so we're not going to be interfered by other carriers, whereas Wi-Fi, anyone can deploy a Wi-Fi router, and there is no management of how many are in any one area. And you'll tend to see when your Wi-Fi, or at home, if you're in an apartment, you tend to see that your Wi-Fi may slow down because there are other Wi-Fi routers operating in that area. On our spectrum, on our licensed spectrum, no one can interfere, so we're only limited by our users, and not it's done in a very controlled manner to give you a higher quality connection. And the second question was labeling the shrouds.
Yes.
In what matter? In what matter?
Labeling it so it indicates what the piece of equipment does or what its function is.
Well, I think what we tried to do was to continue what the expectations were on the 4G, on the current design, which was to make it aesthetically pleasing, avoid any labels, any signage. And so we didn't consider labeling it. It wasn't part of the requirements or objectives. And so we thought that by keeping it clean and simple, it would be much more acceptable. And I don't know if Brent, you have any comments on putting labels on these shrouds?
Yeah, Rob and Commissioner, our franchise agreement specifically prohibits visible markings of any kind on the box for obvious purposes of making them clean and less obvious. But to the extent that anyone requires any identification on it, we can certainly discuss that. Just to amplify Rob's earlier point about the difference between the technologies. So it's important to note 4G and 5G generally used on licensed spectrum is absolutely necessary for the transmission of cellular service. So your cell phones, as we at home or navigate around the city, absolutely rely on 4G and 5G transmitters. Wi-Fi, on the other hand, is more localized to work in specific targeted locations, generally does not hand off to other networks very well. It just works in a discrete area. So in order to traverse the city and have a consistent wireless connection, a robust, consistent wireless connection that will allow you to download large documents or large files or conduct business in other ways, 4G and 5G networks are absolutely necessary.
Thank you.
Signe?
Yes, please. I would like to follow up on the comment that was made about potentially inadequate community feedback on this proposal.
Yeah, thanks, Commissioner. So we did 4 community briefing sessions, 2 with community boards conducted after hours, invited every community board to attend. We did receive a strong turnout from the community in terms of participants. Lots of questions were answered. We spent a couple hours on the phone or on a WebEx, and we received a ton of really good feedback. We similarly went out to the community, the council members and borough presidents as well. We also created in addition to hosting a new website on the city's website for 5G design, we put out a new email address soliciting feedback, and we received a lot of really good feedback. So I think we did a really substantial community outreach effort here, and we're continuing to receive feedback on any number of items related to not only the design, but the program in general.
Signe?
Yes, Ethel.
Thank you. I know in response to one of the major comments earlier, and sorry if I do not remember the name of the person, but as that comment that was made is in many ways fundamental to your decision making and the process, and that is the extent and adequacy of your design process and how detailed and complex that was, and given the diversity of the structures in New York City. And related to that, can you expand further on the selection of the poles and the lampposts and the adaptations that you might or have to make in terms of attaching the shrouds to, for example, Bishop's Crook or a number of the other poles that are not standard and that are essential to the fabric of the city?
Thanks, Michelle. So our fundamental goal here was to establish a single uniform design that works for all carriers, works on every single pole type throughout the city. We understand that these new transmitters, 5G and the 4G service, will need to be deployed everywhere. Not every pole, but every pole type, every pole design type will need to accommodate for the new equipment design. So we didn't want a hodgepodge of different type of different looking antennas for each carrier or each pole type. Our goal was the singular design that worked on every pole type. To that end, I guess the real reason for that is so that we ensure that there aren't pockets of the city that serve essentially as deserts, of wireless deserts, 5G or 4G deserts. And by limiting the design to go on certain pole types, we would effectively be doing that. So it was absolutely paramount that we come up with a single design that works for all, that is the smallest possible design to fit the equipment today and into the future. We don't want to have to be going back to you folks every 2 or 3 years with a new design, because that'll just inherently provide for a mishmash of different type of equipment that's installed on the poles that I don't think anybody wants. So single design that matches the color of the pole and that works for everybody was key.
But with respect, I appreciate your task, but there is a variety of poles, and while you may not have to tailor make to every 5 blocks or so, there is a variety, and the poles both have historic resonance and significance, and even design significance. And it's one design is something you have to do, but it may not, and in fact, I think unlikely to be doing justice to the variety of poles. And I'm not saying go, tailor make to every block, but the variety of poles that exist in this very large city and are very much part of the fabric of the neighborhood's design and all that we may want and need. And why can't there be some distinction made, or can you not do some of that, or single out some examples, or some modification of your process to be able to relate to that point?
Yeah, I would add that, so there are about 6,000 existing 4G installations around the city today, all again with uniform equipment designed just for that purpose on various types of poles. And we felt that it has served us well, both in terms of effectiveness for the carriers to be able to transmit wireless services, and how it generally fits within the streetscape, within the landscape of each community. So I think while this new design is certainly has larger components to it that effectively change the design in some way, it does have remnants to the existing design, which we believe fits well on every pole type. You'll see one of our existing 4G installations on standard poles, on Bishop's Crook style poles, type M's, traffic light poles, various pole types without any real detriment to the surrounding area. Rob, if you have any thoughts about the need for that design.
Yeah, so unfortunately, we're limited to the physics and the physical dimensions of these components. So we designed this antenna top shroud to be the the thinnest, the shortest shroud possible to accommodate the technology. Now, I think this was the best compromise for all the locations. Another design, I don't think we can get any thinner and we can't get any shorter. And so you'll just, any new design would be a different version of what we have. So we have to accommodate the physics of the equipment, the thermal dynamics that are required to cool the equipment, and ensure that it's structurally sound, and both from the pole perspective and from the antenna pole top attachment. So a lot was taken into account to make it to go into this design and ensure that it was met all the requirements.
I'd like to ask one more question. I understand here that the goal is to install the vast majority of equipment in the outer boroughs and upper Manhattan to prevent the digital divide that we currently have, basically the inequity that we presently have. How is DoIT going to ensure that this happens?
Yeah, thanks for that, Commissioner. So that is our strong focus, to ensure that there's an equitable deployment of new wireless infrastructure throughout the city. And in doing so, the very nature of our franchise is that franchisees select poles during what we call periodic reservation phases. It's during these phases that they're assigned a number of poles and a geographic area from which they can select. So when we open up a new reservation phase, typically what we have done of late and what we will continue to do in the past, in the future, is assign a fewer number of poles in Manhattan and more in those areas that have been historically underserved. We want to ensure that there are no, as I mentioned earlier, pockets or deserts of connectivity, particularly during this time with a lot of folks working from home, with kids doing remote schooling. There really needs to be a strong wireless presence. We've done some research and determined that an increasingly number of students and professionals as well working from home are relying on their mobile phones and mobile phone service to as their primary means of connecting to the internet. They don't have a wired broadband connection by choice. And in order to ensure that they can do what they need to do, whether it's work or schooling, they're going to need a strong connection. So we're going to continue, as we open up new reservation phases, to really force the franchisees, force the industry to build out in those areas of the city that have been historically underserved. And we believe that in a very short amount of time, we'll be able to see a real difference there.
Okay. Now, Carrie, at the beginning of our meeting, we discussed the fact that we might be approving every pole type that was shown in that presentation. But that presentation showed Flatbush, Bishop's Crooks, M poles.
Signe, I think your connection is failing.
Oh dear. Yeah, yeah.
Signe?
I could hear Sydney.
I can hear her.
We can all hear. We can hear.
I can hear you.
I think
I
it's
can hear.
just
Carrie's connection. Yeah.
Carrie, can you, well, anyone, any staff person, if you could please help here, because at the beginning of the meeting, we discussed that we might consider approving these poles, these attachments on certain poles, but not all. And so I think that depending on where we're standing right now in our opinion about this, I think we need to become clear as to which poles, if we are prepared to approve this at all, which of course remains a question that I haven't heard from enough commissioners to be able to evaluate. But if we are to move forward in approval, we just saw the Cobra Head, the Flatbush, Bishop's Crook, Downtown Alliance, M-Pole and Dabbit, both single and dual, City Light, Traffic Pole, and TBTA. And I personally have to say that I have strong objections to at least 3 or 4 of those poles. So I think I'd like to try to have a little bit of an organized conversation here. I'd like to first of all hear if there are other commissioners that have generalized concerns about either the community process or the negative health benefits or negative health impact, excuse me. And number two, if you were to move forward with approval, which polls would you approve or which polls would you not approve? And then I think we can dissect this conversation a bit more clearly. So I'm just going to, Lori, do you want to go?
I mean, I hear the health concerns. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I am not qualified to assess that. I don't know how we would try to get any readout on that ourselves. I mean, it's obviously concerning. So I would look forward to hearing from others here as well. So I'll put that over here for a minute. Not that it should be over there, but in terms of the which polls are objectionable, I certainly find a number of them also objectionable. I mean, they look ridiculous. They're just not objectionable. The Bishop's Crook, I think, is beyond anything we want to see here. So I think that one is certainly, and then the other historic poll, what's the name of it? If somebody wants to help me out here, but the one where you've,
The M
sorry,
poll.
the M poll, I think those two are the kind of key, most objectionable of what I see here.
Great, thank you.
Perhaps a way to
taking you in order that I see.
They could be placed like on top of rooftops. In terms of community process, I am a little concerned about that. If it is true that there was not enough outreach, but it seems like the process in general may be flawed if no one feels that actually happens properly. But I don't have the documentation to verify any of, whether the process was adequate or not. But I do agree with Laurie in saying that perhaps there should be another study, a research study in methods or information about radiation that we should also consider. But I do really want to perhaps have in place in some way a way to hold accountable the placement of these Wi-Fi or 5G towers in desert zones. So how do we know that it's actually going to happen that way? So is there some way to mediate this? Like, are we going to go first to all these desert zones and make sure that everyone has adequate 5G and access to Wi-Fi, and then, sort of come back to Manhattan if it's necessary? I mean, how do we know that that's going to be implemented that way? Because that is also a communal or community design in terms of the citywide community design, to have equity among the entire city, explicitly because of COVID-19 and the requirements for education, and also just requirements of hospitals and information to be tracked down to local community centers and access to food and other resources that are necessary at this moment, and may be necessary for a very long time, whether we like it or not.
Yes, I was totally supportive of that accountability question. Richard, Phil, Manuel, somebody?
I think my main concern wearing my hat as a PDC commissioner, it has to do with the poor fit aesthetically of the shroud on certain of the poles that were designed for particular aesthetic purposes. the M poll, the Bishop's Crook. I think that would be a concern I would raise.
And I agree totally with Richard. My concerns, I think the science is beyond are both our purview and certainly my capacity. And I agree that I am concerned that certain polls have particularly bad aesthetic solutions for the shrouds. The two Richard just articulated, I think, are the worst. And there may be others, but those should be studied further without question.
Yeah, for my part, I would say the polls that look older do look odd to me. Type M and Bishop's Crook in particular. Yeah, and I think it's also worth studying, a labeling. I know that kind of feedback has come also, that we've heard and discussed also, that labeling it and indicating what it is. I think some people would want it to be a bit more obvious. I mean, I know that the whole project is to shroud it, kind of, make it more integrated into the light poles, but perhaps there's an elegant way to just mark the functionality of it, not necessarily like label it or brand it. I'm not sure if like the Wi-Fi symbol actually would work in this, if that's actually what it is, because it's not actually Wi-Fi. It could just be a simple, word mark that says 5G. And so, it could help aesthetically in terms of, shrouding it, making it look like the pole that it's on, but also signifying or saying that, it's not quite a part of the pole and it is this added functionality to it.
Okay, I think, I don't know, Ethel, do you want to speak up on the pole types that are most troublesome for you?
I do agree with the two that were mentioned, and I would certainly advocate a more detailed study of exactly what they are doing, and for us to be able to put these questions to the sponsors and get the responses that would help us in making these distinctions. I don't feel completely equipped right now with the proposal, because there are questions about the appropriateness on some of the polls, and I think there may be additional ones. So I support what was stated by Richard, by a couple of the other commissioners, and have a certain reluctance to completely approve until we can get a better understanding and response on that. And that relates a bit to the community engagement question and process, because I think that those questions would be and have been of concern to many different communities.
Oh, all right. Thank you. Thank you all. I will attempt to summarize. There were a number of kind of very specific items that will be in the letter that PDC sends the applicant. But I do think that while science is kind of beyond our purview, I would like to see a summary of the community feedback to understand whether there were other issues raised about health that have not perhaps been properly addressed. So if DeWitt could please provide a summary of the community responses, that would be helpful.
Commissioner, if it's appropriate, I apologize for interrupting. I would like to address some of the questions if you have a moment, that were raised by the commissioners. With respect to, since you just touched on the community outreach effort, we did receive some pretty significant feedback from community board district managers and chairs expressing their happiness and the fact that our outreach effort was sufficient. for their purposes. They were heard. We logged all their concerns. We addressed their concerns proactively, both on the phone and then in subsequent email conversations. With respect to just generally the feedback we received, yes, RF concerns were expressed. We also received a number of concerns about how to ensure that equity would be addressed, and we absolutely are the one who is responsible for that. We select the areas from which the franchisees can use poles. We ensure that they build out in those areas first. So we do have great control over that. But with respect generally, again, to the community outreach, we feel we sufficiently addressed all of their concerns. Again, we understand that there's widespread concern in many areas about RF safety. And we feel that due to our limited authority by nature of the FCC's guidelines on this matter, we can't restrict certain locations from being used because of RF concerns. That is completely in the federal government's wheelhouse. We can only enforce the rules as they are. And we have been for 15 years doing a really good job at enforcing those. And to the franchisees' credit, they have done a great job in complying with those FCC guidelines, and we expect that to continue. But yeah, and one quick note regarding the various light poles that are found around the city. Again, said this a number of times, but it bears repeating. We worked really hard to come up with a single design that worked for all poles. We thought it would be even more obtrusive, frankly, to have various designs for various pole types. It could cause confusion among the public. It could just generally, you'll see a Cobra head potentially across the street from a Bishop's Crook with a different style of installation, and that was concerning to us. So, and one last note about the placement of these poles, and I think it was Commissioner, I apologize for, I think it was Commissioner Miranda mentioned we tagging or somehow identifying the installations with the type of technology used. We have recently put out a new map on our website that will that shows the locations of all existing pole reservations, and will show new ones in the future. And it will indicate the type of technology that's used at each location. So whether it's 4G or potentially Wi-Fi in some cases, it will denote that. So there are other ways, electronic ways of getting that information. So I hope that's helpful to you. Thank you, Commissioner, for that, Commissioner Nielsen, for that opportunity to speak.
Right. And Signy, we did receive from DoIT a sort of a summary that the various public meetings were held and a summary of what some of those responses were, but we have not received from committee boards directly kind of direct testimonies, to be clear on that. And I believe that Lori was going to say something.
I just wanted to say that I also agree with Commissioner Miranda's point about identifying what we're looking at with some kind of a graphic. I think it would be very helpful to have that, and that they not be completely anonymous. I think it would be helpful. I support that.
But I'm saying I'm not, I think it's worth a study. I agree.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think there is usefulness to the fact that they do have a consistent design across all poles, which I think is part of what's contributing to the problem. But I do think that there is value in the design of the thing of itself, being consistent.
Mm-hmm.
Becomes recognizable in space too. But I'm just doing a study of, labeling it a bit more obviously. I mean, it's kind of like a sewer cap. It could be thought of that way, where it's something like recognizable, consistent, but it has a kind of elegant design, and over time becomes integrated into the aesthetic of the streetscape.
We could absolutely take a look at that.
So I don't know if someone wants to put together a motion for how we might move forward here. I would say that I was sort of keeping track of people's what they stated, and if we were to limit the pole types, we would be rejecting locations on the M pole, single and double, and the Bishop's Crook poll. That was the consensus. I personally would like to see more. But I will also say that in my experience, as someone who designs a lot of streetscapes all over the city, I am not concerned that we are compromising underserved communities by limiting these two pole types, because they tend to be in the richer neighborhoods, and I am not at all concerned. And you will find other locations in these neighborhoods on buildings or hardwired in order to do that. So I would like to be quite firm about rejecting the M pole, single and double, and the Bishop's Crook. Now, if somebody else wants to make a motion, I'm dumb today, a motion that might be more inclusive than that for a vote, please speak up. No, I see heads nodding.
We'll do the roll call vote in anyway.
Right, and I'll just flag that staff will prepare kind of some other questions and conditions. I think equity, you know, particular citing, especially in some of the more underserved communities, came up. Wanting something more formal from community boards and community process rather than only do its summary. So there'll be a number of conditions that we'll prepare on the staff side for Do It and DOT to respond.
Some of those will include sidewalk repair and how, if technology changes over the course of the lifetime of the franchise, those are all in our notes and will be included. So would someone like to make a motion to approve the proposal with conditions, some of which are noted in our packet, and some of which we are adding to, which is not the M-pole and not the Bishop's Crook, and more substantive responses from the community boards?
That's fine. How do we, within that, address what Justin was just saying about sending a series of questions from the staff that we would want to hear responses to? How will this and when will those responses occur and integrate with the resolution that we are now proposing?
So Ethel, the points that Signe just raised, it will just add more clarity to those points on the conditions.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So
yes.
I would make the motion that Signe outlined without hopefully having to repeat it. I think it's clear.
I will second it.
Okay, I will now take a roll call vote to approve, reject, table, or abstain. Bill, I guess you're approving?
Yes, approve.
Lori?
Approve.
Manuel?
Approve.
Richard, obviously approved. Ethel?
Approve.
Mary?
Approve.
Okay. 6 is all you need for a successful vote. Okay, I'm going to abstain. I
thought that was I thought that was the motion you wanted.
Yeah.
It's good to be here.
I really do not want this the way it's being handled.
Whoa.
Anyway, it is approved. And I believe that we are now adjourning the public meeting. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Commissioner.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.